Alright, so it's time that we got to our first Marvel Cinematic Universe movie of the year. I think this is the first of three, with Spider-Man and Thor coming right after it. Well, Thor much later, but... and it was too... Obviously, we're now dealing with a sequel to a movie that I did really like, but I didn't take to it quite as much as everybody else seemed to, despite this shirt that I consistently wear. Because it did have a couple of my sort of new favorite characters that just in the cinematic universe in general, with Rocket and Drax. And I do like most of them. Obviously, I do have trouble because I'm not the biggest Chris Pratt fan, which makes it a little hard to get as invested in this as a lot of people, but still, these movies do have a lot to offer, especially with a talent like James Gunn doing them, where we have a guy that's willing to kind of stick with the ideas of what Marvel wants, but at the same time can bring his own crazy-ass shit into it. It does kind of... I do think it's quite interesting that usually in these movies, especially these big superhero movies, it's always... There's usually action and maybe a little bit of suspense and a lot of big things, and there's kind of a steady line of comedy throughout them, like sort of a comedy relief thing, only the Marvel movies have kind of brought that a little further and made it quite prominent. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies specifically seem to be almost, like they're almost as much comedy. Actually, I don't even think there's an almost about it. These movies are basically comedies. They just happen to have all the sci-fi and action elements in them as well. And the thing, normally that would probably not work, and that would be way too much. Like, there would be... It would just be overkill and would get really tired really quick. But the thing is when you look at James Gunn's other movies, like Slither or Super, you'll notice that his style from the get-go has kind of always been, he's in one particular genre, but he can basically keep all the elements of that genre while also being almost a flat-out comedy about it. And this flows right in with that. Like with Slither, we had, you know, horror and, you know, there was a bit of a sci-fi element to that. But it was actually quite a comedy also, as well as Super was this really kind of weirdly dark and disturbing kind of realistic superhero thing, but had a shitload of wild comedy in it. And now here, yes, and they seem to really amp it up too. Like, he actually did take the approach of, let's just take everything we did in the first movie and make it bigger. Let's make a lot more comedy. Let's make the action bigger. Let's just make everything bigger. The emotion, the character development, everything gets bigger and more expanded in this one. Which is really impressive because the first movie itself felt like a pretty massive movie. Especially introducing all these characters to a wider audience, a much wider audience than initially had. And we do start with this, it was brought up a while that Kurt Russell was going to play Chris Pratt's dad, which apparently Chris Pratt suggested as a long shot, and Kurt Russell was actually interested. And we've got this thing now, it's like the new Marvel tradition, where the opening scene involves an older veteran actor made to look younger by today's technology. We had it with Michael Douglas and Ant-Man and Downey at the beginning of Civil War. Now we see young Kurt Russell. It's almost like they've realized they can do it and they can do it well, so now they're obsessed with it. Like every Marvel movie now is probably going to begin with a flashback of an older actor playing their younger self. But as long as it works, whatever. And I did hear that there was I tried to ignore most of it, but I do understand that people were a little up in arms about the marketing and how much Baby Groot was being used, and that Baby Groot was basically being made, being as put in the marketing as, say, the Minions, where marketing people find a specific breakout character and just want to bombard you with it constantly. It's my understanding that's what Baby Groot was doing to people, and some people were uneasy about how tired that was going to get as the movie went on. But really, there was a concern at first because he's the opening credit scene. It actually is a nice scene where he is the focus with all the action going on in the background. Um, but it does kind of make you wonder how much they were going to play this up, and really, it's not that much. He actually feels more like he kind of reminded me a lot of how they used Gizmo in the Gremlins movies. How he's there to be cute and he is kind of a focus, but overall he's just kind of on the side and he's just kind of there to be a counterpart to the main characters. And he may or may not ultimately save the day at the end in some roundabout way. Um, that's which is totally fine. They never do it in a way that I feel like is bombarding you or in a way to make you tired of it. So I thought that was handled really well. And then we obviously something that a criticism the Marvel movies receive a lot is that their villains aren't very strong. And I was kind of wondering, it does kind of, well, when you're looking at like most of the movie and you realize where we're going as far as, something antagonistic that's going against our main characters, the closest we have for a long time is the Sovereign, the Gold People. And they are a very interesting group. They almost kind of feel like, not to insult this movie or anything, but I'm going to be honest, when we were in their place and everything and they were interacting, the Sovereign almost kind of felt like something out of, that you would see in like Jupiter Ascending or something. And they just kind of pop in and out of the movie because Rocket stole from them. They stole their batteries. So they just kind of keep coming and going, and for the most part that's all we have. And there's really the question of where it's going to go from there, but quite honestly, it's kind of because of this that you realize where the second half's going to go pretty clearly if you didn't figure it out from, like, the get-go. But it's one of those things where even though it's blatantly obvious from the get-go, I do think they handled it really well, and they still managed to throw in some stuff that kind of catches you off guard regardless of how much you see the second half coming. So I thought Gunn's writing actually kind of, displayed that just in the right way. I did have some problems as far as, even though I did say we do get bigger as far as the characters go, and we do get to delve more into them. For a while there, I wasn't sure, because for the first half or so, it was all pretty surface level and by the book. Like, the character of Quill through the entire first half of the movie is basically just yelling at people. Like, when he's not fighting with Rocket, he's fighting with Gamora, and when he's not fighting with Gamora, he's fighting with his dad, and that's pretty much all he does for actually a lot of the movie. Is just get into fights with people and argue with people, and that kind of you do kind of start to worry about that after a while, and it's like, he's supposed to be our main character here, and this is supposed to be a big plot element introducing his dad. But is this what we're gonna do? We do have the nice scene where they do, obviously if you're like a Field of Dreams fan, or just in general, you'll notice that the ultimate father-son activity seems to be throwing a ball back and forth, and they do have a nice take on that, of the two of them, this, intergalactic version of that, or whatever. But yeah, for the most part, it's pretty much kind of the same stuff. It's, why did you leave Mom? I'm pissed off you weren't there, etc. And then Gamora getting mad for similar reasons that branch off of this. But once we really get into it, and there's something nice going on with Rocket here too that's kind of, we don't really notice it at first, but there's kind of a nice kind of direction that Rocket's character is taking, and something that's kind of coming back around as he goes. I like the way that was placed throughout the movie. And what we've done with the character of Yondu, I would not have suspected how crucial a character he'd be, despite the fact that we do know that, Quill was basically brought up by him, even if it was to be a criminal, more or less. But I really appreciated just how much they added to his character, as well as Nebula, believe it or not. After I've so often criticized Karen Gillan for being one of the absolute worst actresses working today, probably second under Cobie Smulders for the absolute worst of actresses that are working now. But I don't know if it's the writing that helped her bring it out or what, but the way her character gets a bit more to work with. I actually ended up really liking her in this, which I didn't think was going to happen, at least for a long time. So I really like the way we kind of, bring that forward and make these characters that were really just kind of in the background and somewhat antagonists in the first movie. Really, because usually, as you just saw with me talking about The Fate of the Furious, I really can't stand the whole bad person or somewhat bad person goes good and goes on the good side, but I thought that was handled... It was absolutely great here, actually, because I'm actually underplaying it, how well this was done. Because one of the great things about this movie is that even though it does feel like we're kind of retreading some stuff, and it does feel like some of the action scenes are rehashed, even from the first movie, like, the scene where Rocket and Yondu break out kind of felt similar to, like, the jailbreak in the first movie. Where this movie's heart is, and these beautiful emotional moments that come out of it, are not something I was really expecting. Because, I mean, you do expect the characters will interact, and there might be a heartwarming moment here or there and all that. But no, the emotion and the heartwarming moments in this movie, and even some of the sad moments, are really, really strong. As I said, in a way I just really was not expecting. The entire last 20 minutes or so of this movie is really, really good stuff, and really good to see the progression of these characters. To where the movie is just kind of, it's like fun, and it's like, yeah, we have action here, there's comedy here, just all this normal stuff. But then we get towards the end here, and this becomes really good movie making, like to a point that it had not reached yet. But they really reached into something here, and something that's also missing a lot from the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general. Is just, like, there are some, strong moments, like, especially, Civil War had a lot of really good scenes in it as far as character-driven stuff, but I feel like the Cinematic Universe really reached a peak here as far as how it's treated its characters, and how what happens to these characters makes you feel. And yeah, it got really good there in a way I wasn't expecting in, like, the last 20 minutes or so. And I do like the climax also, where it's, in these movies, and it's been criticized to death now, where in a Marvel movie, the climaxes just get really, really big, and, like, there's CGI everywhere, and it just gets big, and it's like, the world's gonna end, and all that other stuff. But the thing that I was afraid of was that we basically copied the climax of the first movie, where we're just in ships and we're firing at people like it's, a giant video game or something. Though I did really like how, when the Sovereign are shooting at them, how they're from a distance, and it's, like, simulated, so it's like, for them, so it's like they're just playing an arcade video game, and everybody's around them cheering them. I actually really liked that aspect. But as far as the actual climax of the movie, I did like that the characters were actually in it. Kind of like even in the first Avengers movie, when they were all, in it, all the big shit was up here. In this one, they're in the big shit, personally. And I really liked how that was done. And how it didn't necessarily feel like it was played out either. Like, there are the movies like this, when they get to climaxes like this, the climaxes can go on and on and on until you're just dead inside and you're like, okay, just end this now. They keep it going, and even though a lot of the criticism for these movies also comes from the lack of stakes, which sure is true, like, we know that, one of our main characters, may not die in this. It's still, like, most of them, if not all of them, are going to get out of it. But we still care enough about the characters because we've gone through all these, emotional mazes into them, and really brought out these sides to them that we didn't see in the first movie. You still really hope for their safety and really want them to get out of this, and there's still something in there that keeps you grasped onto it. Even if, you know, the ultimate outcome is, for the most part, what was always going to be. But they do throw some stuff in there to shake it up a little bit, and I do really like that, and it really does add a huge strength. This might be, I don't want to say too much, but this is something that the Marvel world could probably do a little more when you look at this and see how much of an impact it made, and how much of an impact it's going to make, seemingly, on the characters as we go. So yeah, when that's kind of what we're looking at when we say maybe Marvel can raise the stakes a little bit in regards to their climaxes and how big we go and exactly what the dangers of it are and how close our heroes are to it. um, and there is some stuff that I do feel like drags it a little bit, and this is mostly comedy stuff, like the scene, like the mask scene when he's trying to get the dog to get the keys when he's in jail. Um, in here we have the scene where Rocket and Yondu are trying to get Baby Groot to get his fin, his prototype fin, because his was shot off by Nebula, and it's a funny scene, but I mean it goes on a long time. Like there were probably 2 or 3 times that Baby Groot came back with something else that could have been cut from this movie. We could have just kind of sped through it a little bit. The movie's like 2 hours and 16 minutes. It could probably just be 2 if we cut some. Like some of the banter goes on for a really long time. And starts to feel really repetitive. There's the bit at the end when Rocket's looking for tape to keep Groot from pressing the button. That went for a pretty long time, especially for what was going on. There's like 2 or 3 scenes in the movie where people even say, you know, is this a conversation we should be having now? And it's like, James Gunn, if you have to write that sentence more than once, you should probably be cutting some dialogue. That's just the way I see it, though. And they do, I mean, it does get a little, as much as the emotion does work, there are some cheesy moments. As I was talking about, we just had a franchise movie with Vin Diesel and Kurt Russell in it, and now we have another. And there's a theme that this one seems to want to pick up from that one, which is Drax saying that they're family. And it's the Fast and the Furious franchise has made that such a running thing that it was almost kind of hard to hear Drax say it without thinking it was supposed to be unironic. Because I, like, when he said that, I almost expected laughter from the crowd. But I think it's actually supposed to be a serious moment in the movie, because that is the way. Because Gamora even has the line where he's like, you know, I found my family with my dad, and she's like, I thought you already found your family, and then storms away. I think that's... Yeah, I don't think we need that in there when the rest of the stuff works so well that we get later. So, and I mean, like, you definitely could have given people that vibe without Drax actually having to say the line, we're family. Almost like he's doing a Vin Diesel impression. But anyway, so yes, and okay, yeah, the last thing I want to touch on was something that I criticized the first movie for, which everybody loves, I know, and that's the soundtrack. My problem with the soundtrack in the first movie was I felt like it was just a really, really easy way to make a crowd pleaser. Like, you have a scene happen and you just throw a song up there that you know everybody loves, it's considered like a classic song, and voila, your scene just automatically works because people like the song. I felt like it was really cheap, and it was a massive crutch, especially making the tape a plot point. I thought was quite overkill, and how it seemed like a lot of Gunn's focus was just, oh, what songs will be awesome with this, as opposed to creating the scenes around them. But in this movie, I liked that the songs aren't obscure by any means, but they're significantly lesser known than the ones in the first movie, and that felt more like, I don't know if it's just because they're songs that you don't hear constantly like the ones in the first movie, but it did feel like he actually, number one, put more effort into choosing them, and secondly, actually chose them, like, it felt more like he built the scenes and then chose the song to go with it instead of the other way around, which may not be the way he did it, but it actually felt that way, which feels much more it just feels like much more of an effort was put into it, which is something that I thought the soundtrack had going against the first movie. Um, so yes, overall I was quite happy with it, but when it got to those last parts, it got really great. And like I said, expanding on some of the smaller characters and not just the big ones. Yondu getting a nice badass moment that kind of amps up his one in the first movie where he just used the arrow and then all the dudes dropped. In this one, he gets the whole damn thing. There's the one shot where we see it in the dark. It's really awesome, badass stuff. So yes, that's what we're looking at here. I think I have no idea what our schedule is this month. I know Pirates is in here somewhere. Spider-Man's around here somewhere. You'll these will be in there at some point. And there's going to be another Versus tomorrow. There's all that stuff if you're still interested. Fargo weekly until it ends. All of that. So until we get to all that other fun stuff, I guess now we just hold out for our next outing with Spider-Man, and we'll see what that brings. So until then, we're done here.